Before I start the video, as a quick reminder, check out my links down below to help support the channel. I am now in partnership with Baron of Dice. They have some awesome TCG accessories like playmats, deck boxes, and dice. And if you want to level up your setup, it is the perfect way to do so. And if you want to support the channel directly and get some sweet perks, consider joining the Patreon. If you want to get early access to videos or even some deck help, Patreon is where it's at. And so without further ado, let's get back into the video. Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Devin with Jurassic Magic, and in today's video I wanted to go over a commander that basically took me by surprise. I was quite shocked to see how fun this commander was. Obviously from the thumbnail, I am going to be talking about Tannuk Memorial Ensign. I thought the other version of Tanuk, the mono red version, was going to be more fun, cheating in big giant artifacts and creatures. However, after playtesting a lot of different Edge of Eternity's commanders, Tannuk Memorial Ensign is the one that I found to be the most fun. And this is based off of me playing Tanuk on Brawl. I'm going to be building it in paper and playtesting it out in Commander, but there's a lot of fun things that I've done with Tanuk that I wanted to share with you today. So it's not going to be necessarily a normal kind of video where I talk about a lot of different staples and synergies. I'm just going to talk about my play experience and talk about a lot of cards along the way. I'm still going to give you a general overview of how I built the deck and what cards I put in here and what cards I didn't necessarily want to put in, mainly because I didn't want to think too long. So just to give you a quick summary of this deck and what it's about, it's all about landfall and burn. Tanuk himself is quite powerful and can be a win con of the command zone if you have enough landfall triggers going on. For 1 red and a green, legendary creature, Kavu Pilot, and he has the landfall ability. Whenever a land you control enters, Tanuk deals 1 damage to each opponent. If this is the second time this ability has resolved this turn, draw a card. And he has a 2/4 body, which is quite good at blocking a lot of different small creatures. So what I found with this card is you use this either as the win con or as a value engine. It kind of goes both ways because you're drawing cards whenever a second land enters the battlefield, and slowly, little by little, or if you go rapid enough, you could potentially close out the game with just Tanuk itself. Outside of that, there's a lot of cards similar to Tanuk that I wanted to highlight, like Sabotender, Spitfire Lagak, and Tunneling Geopede, which all have that ability whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. Having multiple of these type of effects is going to be very important for us, just to amplify the damage a little bit more, draining our opponent's life totals further and further. Another important thing for a landfall deck is playing multiple lands a turn: Oracle of Moldiah, Dryad of the Elysian Grove, Exploration, Wayward Sawtooth, and the best one of them all, Azusa Lost But Seeking. Playing additional lands on your turns means you're going to deal a lot more damage with your commander or all these other options that burn your opponents too. These cards also pop off with cards that have Crucible of World-like effects, something like Crucible of Worlds itself, Conduit of Worlds, Walk-in Closet, and Forgotten Cellar can all provide that option of playing lands from your graveyard to the battlefield, and these also work pretty well with the synergy of playing multiple land drops a turn when combining them with fetch lands. Because you can play a fetch land from your graveyard, have the landfall trigger enter, have it go back to your graveyard when you search for your library for a land, and then play that again and over again the more additional land drops you do have. So combining these two elements will be insane for your deck. But what if I told you they put all these elements into one card with Icetill Explorer? This is probably the most insane landfall card that I've ever seen in my life. Playing this on Brawl already showed me the power level of this card. For 2 and 2 green, you may play additional land on each of your turns, and you may play lands from your graveyard, so you're getting both of those effects stapled onto one. But wait, of course there's more with the landfall trigger. Whenever a land you control enters, you mill a card. So this is great if you play a land from your hand, put it onto the battlefield, you mill that card, and if it's a land, you can play that land from your graveyard to the battlefield, and then you will mill another card. This is such a great engine for the deck, especially milling a lot of different cards. You could utilize that walk-in closet the other side where you have a Yawgmoth's Will to cast all those cards that you had in your graveyard and play them onto the battlefield too with all that mana. Later, I will talk about Icetill Explorer and a combo that I accidentally ran into in Arena that can apply into Commander too, but I was so shocked of how efficient this card is. Of course, that's just the tip of the iceberg. We have the options of playing additional lands and playing lands from our graveyards. Both of those are going to be excellent for us to get multiple land drops a turn, but of course we want landfall payoffs too. If you want to get more mana, Lotus Cobra and Tireless Provisioner are each great for the deck. Just getting you that little boost of mana can provide immense value, especially if you sacrifice a bunch of lands and put a lot of lands on the battlefield. I'll discuss some of those cards later, but getting multiple land drops, getting multiple manas can provide you a way to close out the game. There are also some other payoffs like Omnath Locus of Rage that will put a bunch of tokens on the battlefield when you have a land enter the battlefield. You could also include Avenger of Zendikar, Rampaging Baloths, and one of my personal favorites, Springheart Nantuko, which can bestow itself on a creature, and if you pay into that mana cost whenever a land enters the battlefield, you make a token copy of that creature. This is insane and can be part of a combo that I'll talk about later. However, if it's not part of a combo, it'll just make a 1/1 insect creature token, which is kind of similar to a card that I refuse to put in any deck, and that's Scoot Swarm. I know a lot of people love this card. I personally hate it, and I think it's a mistake of a card. I just refuse to play because of the immense amount of math, and even Morrow has stated before that Scoot Swarm is a mistake of a card, but there is no going back. I'm sorry, all Scoot Swarm fans, I'm just not personally a big fan of the card. There are some other landfall payoffs that buff up your creatures like Bristly Bill Spinesower, or even Might Form Harmonizer. Each of these are pretty powerful in this type of deck. You could also include Mossborn Hydra. It buffs up itself, but that's completely okay. Each of these in the right type of situation can help us close out the game. Other effects I would like to highlight are sacrificing your lands for more additional value. What I do mean by that is by using cards like Nahiri's Lithoforming. This is insane, especially with a Crucible Worlds-like effect. You sacrifice X lands for each land. Sacrifice this way you draw a card. You may play X additional lands this turn, where lands you control enter the battlefield tapped this turn. Let me tell you something. This absolutely closes out games for sure if you have Tanuk on the battlefield. And let's just say hypothetically you have 10 lands on the battlefield. You pay 2 into that red cost and pay 8 mana. You sacrifice all those lands, draw 8 cards, and then play 8 additional lands. And if you have a Crucible Worlds-like effect on the battlefield, you can play those lands that you sacrificed back onto the battlefield from the graveyard. And it's almost like nothing. You drawed that much cards and got all those landfall triggers. And all those landfall triggers will apply for your commander, all those token makers, or even those mana cards like Lotus Cobra. So seriously, Nahiri's Lithoforming, do not underestimate it. This has won me a ton of games playing it. Another card similar to Nahiri's Lithoforming would be Famished Worldsire. This came out of the new Edge of Eternity set, which is quite powerful. It is 8 mana, but again, you're in a landfall deck. It's not going to be hard to get a lot of lands on the battlefield and cast this, but it does have Devour Land 3. So for each land you sacrifice, you'll put 3 1/1 counters on Famished Worldsire, and he has a very powerful ETB looking at the top X cards of your library, where X is that creature's power. Put any number of lands from among them onto the battlefield tapped and shuffle. So this is pretty much a Nahiri's Lithoforming on steroids. You could get a ton of lands on the battlefield. Let's just say you just sacrifice 4 lands. You're going to make this a 12/12 looking at the top 12 cards of your library and put any lands on the battlefield. This has a high risk, high reward kind of game style. I haven't played this personally, but I do believe it's going to be very strong. Let me know down below in the comments if you've had any experience with this and would like to share it. But let's move along and talk about another very powerful spell with Scapeshift. Everybody knows this card. It is a classic. Sacrifice any number of lands, search your library for up to that many land cards, put them onto the battlefield tap, then shuffle your library. This is a mega tutor at the cost of sacrificing your lands. But again, if you have like a Lotus Cobra on the battlefield and you put that many lands on the battlefield, you're going to get a ton of mana off of this. I like using this in the situation where if you have 10 lands on the battlefield, you just tap them all for mana, have them floating in the air, then cast Scapeshift, sacrifice as much lands as you want while having that mana floating in the air. You get 10 landfall triggers, and you're really going to town getting the best 10 lands of the deck. So there's a lot of ways to win with this. Of course, just sacrificing a ton of lands, having your commander out on the battlefield, and other ping effects can close out the game, or you make a ton of creatures, or you get a lot of value out of those other landfall triggers. But of course, if you sacrifice a bunch of lands, a lot of them are going to go to the graveyard. You might as well take advantage of Splendid Reclamation like effects. Splendid Reclamation itself is very good. Return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So all those lands you sacrificed prior can all just re-enter the battlefield. You could also apply this to Aftermath Analyst. You could sacrifice him to sacrifice this creature, return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. But I think one of the better options would be easily Lemra Bellow of the Woods, mainly because it's a payoff. It has vigilance and reach, and its power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control, and when it enters, you mill 4 cards and return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. This could be a huge creature on the battlefield that we could swing in and block with because it has vigilance. So adding in some of these options to return lands from your graveyard to the battlefield is going to be a no-brainer. But now I wanted to move along and talk about some of my personal favorite win cons with landfall strategies. A classic would be Cultivator Colossus and Abundance. This is a classic combo that a lot of people called out right away when they saw Cultivator Colossus. Abundance, because Abundance has that ability. If you would draw a card, you may instead choose a land or non-land and reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a card of the chosen kind. Put that card into your hand and put all other cards revealed this way on the bottom of your library in any order. So you choose land every single time with Cultivator Colossus' ETB of just putting lands constantly on the battlefield, basically putting all the lands from your deck onto the battlefield. And if you have Tanuk out or another card that I'll talk about later, you can just straight up win the game. Another fun combo that I accidentally stumbled upon was using Icetill Explorer, and I attached it with Springheart Nantuko. And of course, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 1 and a green, and if it's attached to a creature, you create a token that's a copy of that creature. So with that in mind, I also had a Lotus Cobra on the battlefield. So the way this essentially worked is I had a lot of lands in my graveyard and a couple of fetch lands, and because Icetill is a Crucible Worlds-like effect, I could put one of those lands from my graveyard to the battlefield, and then 3 separate landfall triggers would happen. Lotus Cobra would add an additional mana, Springheart will trigger, and I make an extra token copy of Icetill. And because Icetill has that ability of playing an additional land each turn, I kept making copies over and over again, getting Lotus Cobra triggers, getting Springheart triggers, and milling my whole entire deck, because whenever a land enters the battlefield, I mill a card. And of course, the more copies I had of Icetill, the more cards I was milling. I ended up milling my whole entire deck. However, since you technically don't lose off of your whole deck milled, you have to draw a card, and if you don't have a library, you do lose that way. I had my commander out and essentially just blasted everybody on the table and won that game specifically. So this was just a cool combo that I found. Hopefully I explained it all correctly. I have the proof on this picture that I'll show here. I just have 3 life points left. This can be applied for commander because all these are legal in commander too. So I just wanted to quickly highlight this because I just thought it was so cool that I just found this randomly. So outside of that combo, this is actually secretly a Valakut Molten Pinnacle secret commander deck. Valakut is one of my favorite lands of all time because it just deals a lightning bolt to somebody every single landfall trigger a mountain enters. So combining that with Dryad of the Elysian Grove, making lands you control are every basic land type, including a mountain, makes every landfall trigger deal 3 damage to any target. That's at least a creature or a player. It doesn't target any other things. And of course, if you use like Escape Shift, you can search your library for a Valakut and all these additional lands and really just go to town and potentially win the game. Because I mostly played Arena, there was also some other cards that I wish were on there that especially synergize with Tannuk Memorial Ensign. This is not necessarily a win con, this is just going to be great value engines like Keen Sense and Snake Umbra. Whenever enchanted creature deals damage to an opponent, you may draw a card. This is insane because every land that enters the battlefield, Tanuk is going to deal 1 damage to each opponent, which in turn will draw you 3 cards per land drop. Of course, this is already known, I just wanted to quickly highlight it. So those are some of the win cons, a lot of the different strategies behind Tannuk the Memorial Ensign. So I would love to hear your thoughts down below in the comments. This is not my normal type of deck tech video. This is just a card that I've honestly found very fun and enjoyable. It really just makes Landfall a lot more fun instead of just the endless loop of people playing Tatyova or AC. Not having a direct, clear win con. Tanuk can be a win con in the command zone, but I would love to hear your thoughts down below in the comments. Do you plan on playing this commander yourself? And if you have played this commander yourself, let me know down below in the comments how fun it is, or what other kind of strategies do you kind of go around. Again, I'd love to hear your thoughts down below in the comments. Also, if you can, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And with that out of the way, thank you for stopping by.